Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today, Max and Mark. So this is a video discussion for the Institute of Youth Work, interested in hearing the voices of youth workers, particularly when they're not working in what might be seen as traditional youth working spaces like a youth club or a youth centre. So maybe we'll start by you guys introducing yourselves.
Well, my name is Max Hawkins. I am working towards a degree in youth work at the moment. I have done foundation year. I'm now in year one. I've nearly completed that. I also work within the NHS, doing peer support roles on the mental health wards, and I'm co-chair of Autism Forum.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, and I'm Mark Wright. I'm a youth and community worker with the Early Intervention in Psychosis team. I've been doing this job now for about 15 years. It's created lots of challenges. It's actually allowed me to flourish as a practitioner. And, you know, this is going to be a really interesting conversation, hopefully.
Definitely, I hope so. So I'm the development officer at the Institute for Youth Work, but also a youth worker. So have some youth work experience to bring to the conversation. But I've got some set questions, and I will ask the question, and then we'll just have an open discussion about it, and just really relish hearing your perspectives. I think that's the most important thing. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Real. Okay, so the first question is, how do you do youth work in a system that is not traditionally a youth work space, such as the NHS?
Okay, so I guess from my perspective, when I first started this role, I was the first youth worker that they employed. And I must admit that for quite a time, I found it very difficult to establish myself. I would look at other sort of mental health practitioners and think, I'm not like them. Am I professional? I mean, the conversation around as a youth worker professional is still an ongoing conversation within the NHS, I guess. And many youth work students also talk about this idea that we're not like, you know, the other mental health professionals. And I keep saying, good, that's absolutely fine. Because it's about complementing what these guys do, not trying to recreate what these guys do. So, you know, for quite a time, that took me quite a long time to get my head around the fact that I was, you know, equally as valid. And you know, the social perspective around working with young people, I think is becoming increasingly more recognised now. But that was a bit of a battle first thing, I guess. But, you know, now I think I've grown as a practitioner, and maybe the team has sort of got more used to me now. They've got more used to maybe some of my outlandish ideas or theories that actually they take on board. Because at the end of the day, you know, you're a bridge between the young people you work with and the, I guess, in this respect, the medical model. And, you know, I think I'm very successfully now. We work in a youth sort of orientated way. I mean, early intervention in psychosis is a concept I think has come from Australia and New Zealand. And it basically, at the heart of it, is working, you know, in a youth orientated way. And that is about, you know, looking at the background to that person. And it works on something called the strengths approach, which is about, you know, we focus on the individual's strengths, not the weaknesses. As soon as you meet a young person or anybody, they'll start telling you what they can't do or why they're a problem. And we say, stop. You know, if I tell you what I'm no good at, we'll be here all day. Why don't you tell me what you're good at? Because that's much more important, isn't it? And that's about focusing on the strengths. You know, developing the relationship is the most important thing. And I'm just aware at the moment that a lot of, you know, nurses and a lot of, you know, OTs, they're very overworked at the moment. I guess to some extent, the early intervention model has been challenged quite a lot by the challenges of, you know, teams finding it hard to move people on, you know, lack of resources around. So, you know, we've got lots of challenges in our society. So all interventions are jointly negotiated. I'm not going to tell or force somebody to do something. I will have an open, you know, constructive conversation. And if someone chooses to do something that we might feel is unwise or unsafe, we will talk about that and allow that person to make that interaction. I guess for me, some years ago, I worked with a young man who wanted to move out of, because we work in Derby, he wanted to move out of Derby, he wanted to move somewhere else. He had absolutely no local connection there. He had no friends there. And after about 4 days, his placement fell through. And his mother said to me, oh, you know, that was a failure, wasn't it? And I said, no, it wasn't a failure. That had to happen for him to learn. And I think it's very difficult sometimes to apply this youth work perspective, which is about, you know, working with risk and allowing things that functionally don't work. But to us, that's a learning curve. To anybody from a more structured perspective, that will be seen as a failure. So again, that's also a challenge that we face. You know, the community is a waste of resources. Absolutely, in Derby, there are just so many, you know, resources around. I guess if you live in a more rural setting, or you know, then it's much more difficult to do. But I guess we're blessed by lots of facilities, you know, as regards art. You know, we do have a pool group on a Friday. But again, it's not really about playing pool. That's just a platform. It's really about developing relationships, you know, within that platform. And you know, our peer support worker has recently been employed, so that's absolutely excellent. And that you know, that very sort of path from being in our service to being a volunteer and then to finding employment. And part of my role was to give this young person supervision within his role, but also to help him with interview techniques. Actually, you know, giving him some, you know, pep talks about, okay, you didn't get this job, so what? You know, I know you've got these strengths. I know you've got these skills and abilities because I've seen them. And also, you know, writing references is also a big part of my role. You know, we don't see people in their houses. We generally see people out. I usually meet people in a local cafe, which is a really good place. They do like the Happy Cafe there as well sometimes. So, you know, that's also a fantastic oasis of resorts. That's the Quad in Derby, by the way.
Big up Quad.
There's a bit of advertising there, yeah. And, we work on the idea that, you know, the people with mental health problems, they can change, and people can learn to actually deal with things. And I guess one of the things that I talk about quite a lot is actually, you know, maybe this is time for you just to stop and actually think about what you want to do with your life and what you want to do, you know, with yourself. I mean, I do some work with we go into schools and interview young people, and I went to a school and their teacher came in and he just said, oh, I'm glad you guys are here. These young kids don't know what they want to do. And I just sat there and thought, great, why would they? They're only 15 years old. Why are we taking away that joy of finding things out and actually finding out what they're about and discovering things? Why are we trying to, put children on a path even at the age of 15? You know, it doesn't work like that. We have to be flexible. Nowadays, we have to be flexible in the way, you know, we learn transferable skills. And actually, you know, it's about taking on challenges. It's not about being stuck in a rut, you know. Jobs for life are now.
So on that, like, Mark, and then we'll see, Max, if you want to, you know, contribute anything to that question. But on that then, so it does sound like you do some fantastic stuff, and it does sound like, you know, the methodology and the principles behind youth work are able to manifest themselves in the work that you do. But it also sounds like there are some challenges that you're maybe, it sounds to me like sometimes you are confronted by other people in these professions that are not traditional youth work spaces who don't get what you're doing. And I'm just curious, like, how do you deal with that?
I guess for me, that, you know, I work with a lot of medical students as well, and I always ask them to look beyond the medical model. So I will refer people like to DEMOS or to the IPPR website, and I will say, read some of these documents around like, you know, social bridging, you know, developing social capital, you know. So look around these theories. We don't have to keep looking at a purist model. Look and integrate things in the way that you work. And I think that's really, really important as a youth and community worker, that you know, me and Max were talking earlier about the fact that you read around your subject and you integrate practices from other disciplines as well. That, you know, we're never standing still, we're never static. There's always something new to learn. And I think for me, the joy of being in this role is actually that I'm actually sort of encouraged to learn, and I've got a really great manager who gives me sort of carte blanche really to develop the role, and just says, you know, go and do something, and then we'll have a look at it. And so it's very rarely that, you know, it's very rarely a no when I ask to do something. Whereas when I first came here, it was like, well, you know, you can't do that. And I used to go to the point where, actually, why have you employed me? If you keep saying no to everything that I'm saying to you, you know, why have you employed me? Maybe we should think about why I'm actually here. And, you know, and I think we've all learned. It's not just me that's learned. I think the team's learned as well. I think my managers learned. And I would have to say that, you know, within Derbyshire Healthcare Foundation Trust, you know, our chief exec and deputy chief exec, and obviously Carolyn Green, who Max works with, you know, the people at the top actually do understand, you know, that this more social stroke community approach to well-being is very, very important. And actually the medical model isn't, you know.
So on that note, Max, do you want to jump in and say, from your perspective?
Yeah, well, obviously I've not been working for 15 years or longer within the services that I'm working in, but working with Carolyn, I've learned a lot in a very short space of time. Like Mark, you said about not knowing quite where you fit, and I suppose I've had that that thought as well. You know, what am I doing here? Where do I fit? You know, I'm not there to take someone else's job, like, but I'm kind of an in-between. I found that I do a lot of work which is similar to OTs and mental health nurses and HCAs, like all mixed into one. And I do have my boundaries and my professional boundaries, but they're a lot more lax than if I was a mental health nurse or
flexible.
Yeah, I'm more flexible to be able to do what I need to do to work with people, because I'm working on wards. I don't have the luxury of going to a cafe or doing a pool night as such. It's not as easy to do those sort of things, so you kind of have to work around that and think, okay, well, what can I do with this person to help build a rapport and help them grow and achieve their goals while they're here. And in a lot of cases they don't want to be there because, you know, they feel that they should be at home where they are more comfortable, which, you know, I think every person at some point feels that way, especially if you're in a ward environment. It's very clinical, you haven't got your home comforts, and you have to show that consistency. I mean, a lot of the work I do is about being consistent with them and making sure that they know what they want to do, and then working with them on that, not just saying, oh, okay, you want to do this and then handing it off as such. And I need to really do that with them and do a lot of intense individual work to be able to help them achieve that. And I suppose one of the challenges is that it does take a lot longer than if I was in the outside world, but also I'm on a time constraint because that individual is not going to be there on that ward forever. So my work can be quite limited.
And I was going to say, I think one of the things that I'm kind of hearing is that, you know, and totally challenge me and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but, you know, for me, youth work is primarily a process-based activity. You know, we walk alongside those young people for the time that we're in their life, and it's not necessarily about the product, about the output. But conversely, society and services and a lot of the places that we find ourselves are product and output focused. You know, what will be achieved? What is the outcome of this activity?
Like on wards, for example, a lot of it's like, let's get this person well enough that they can go home. And, you know, for the individual you're working with, it's not always about getting to that point. you know, it's about, a lot of it's about self-exploration,
Yeah,
about
yeah.
what they want, what goals they want, where they want to go. You know, it's not necessarily about being the picture of health, or at least well enough to go home. And, you know, obviously you have the challenge of medication being involved as well, which can really skew a process, or make it take a little longer at least, you know, which is perfectly fine by me. But, you know, as I say, with the time constraints, it can be challenging.
If I might, because actually I think we're just naturally segueing into our second question, actually. So I'll ask it and then we'll just carry on. I think we can carry on along the same line. So you work with young people facing lots of challenges, like you were just describing, giving us some really good examples of the kind of work that you do. How do you think the most vulnerable young people in society are faring at the moment with what's going on in the world?
I think I'm going to share a little on a personal level. As I said, I work with people on the wards and whatnot. I should probably share what brought me to that. Well, Mark mentioned earlier about, you know, going into schools and say the head teacher saying, "Oh, glad you're here. You can help them figure out what they want." Well, I didn't figure out what I wanted until I was 25. I'm now 28. And I've had a plethora of issues with my health physically and mentally. And I think now, especially with the lockdown and the pandemic, it's brought it more to light for me about not only how difficult it's been for me to manage, but other people who may possibly be more unwell than me, who may struggle to know where to turn or who to turn to. And, you know, I think society as a whole has been really struggling at the moment, and it's been really challenging for everybody. I think a lot of people may possibly be grasping at straws a little, because, you know, this is unprecedented. It's not something that you can predict happening. There was no contingency plan. So a lot of it's working on your feet, which is a lot of what youth workers do. And you know, I'm really glad to be a part of that supporting role where I can help people, you know, manage things better, whether that be a phone call or, you know, a text or something really unconventional, to be like, you know, hey, how you doing? How you getting on? Are you okay? Like, not even necessarily, not with clients as such, but with other family members that I'm used to seeing all the time that, you know, may be struggling. You know, I suppose it's given a lot of people time to reflect and realize, you know, maybe I should reach out to the people I don't speak to that often, check on how they're doing. So I think in a way it's been a challenge, but it's on the flip side of that, on the good side of that, it has brought a lot of people closer together.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I attended a meeting yesterday with the health-based youth work group that, you know, that our service is part of, and I think one of the things that I sort of found out there was that actually some of the practitioners who work more on wards, things like Teenage Cancer Trust and stuff, that they're actually being able to engage with more young people actually digitally, because more young people are choosing to engage digitally rather than personally. So, you know, there are challenges and there are people, you know, who are, you know, losing out at this time. You know, I've got a young person who's not had a laptop. You know, he's at school, he's discharged from hospital. He's not had a laptop for, I think, about 4 or 5 months. So he's behind on his schoolwork. You know, the laptop scheme, you know, is kicking into place now. But at the moment, he still hasn't got a laptop. You know, and we've been asked to get involved with the local MASH team around, you know, how we can work better with young people who are being discharged from hospital. You know, so youth workers are, you know, being asked their opinion about things and having a voice for young people.
I think a lot of people are struggling, you know. For example, my partner's laptop died. needed to finish the degree. He's coming up to graduating, you know. Very luckily, the university has something in place, have sent one, so he's got one so he can do his work. That's great. But there are a lot of people who might not have that option or know where to look or who to speak to get help with those things, and then their education can end up adversely affected, which we all know that when things aren't going right, it has an adverse effect on behaviour, which when you're in lockdown can make home life very difficult, especially if you are at home at that point.
There's a presumption, isn't there, that people will have the technology, and there's two things I think with that. I mean, firstly, I remember, you know, when everyone was using Facebook, and I know, you know, it's Snapchat and TikTok and other things now that young people are engaging with, but even, you know, at the start of the Facebook boom, many of the youth work services were just saying, we don't know, we've got no control over this technology, we don't know how to use it in a way that it aligns with our safeguarding policies. And a lot of people were saying, you know, we don't work on those platforms, that's not where youth work happens. So the first thing is, you know, obviously what's happened has happened, and now all of a sudden, you know, youth workers are on all sorts of online platforms, and I wonder what the implication of that might be, because before, you know, your managers or whatever would say, no, you can't use that tool.
It's an ethical boundary, and it's a professional boundary that you don't cross. But now, because of this pandemic, it's like, well, how are we going to keep in touch with our young people? You know, how are we going to make sure that they're being safe and that they're okay? Well, technology is the way forward for that in this situation, at least. And I think it's challenged a lot of boundaries for people. And I think people who haven't been willing to, I don't know, overcome that challenge by, you know, plowing forward with some technology, it can have a real adverse effect on the young people they're working with, because, you know, and I think as well with all the social media and that, you know, it's quite classic with social media, you always put your best foot forward. And I think that would be quite a large challenge when working with young people, because, you know, if you've got them on social media because you're there for support and you're seeing all these great things they're doing, that might not necessarily be true. They might be having a really hard time. And, you know, it's finding a balance. I think I don't think we're quite there yet with that.
No, I agree, but I guess necessity is a good invention, I guess, and I guess what's happened, as we said, is about dealing with a pandemic that's you know, that's been sprung on us, I guess. And you know, from my perspective, I've just picked up a young chap that I'm working with, who actually prefers to interact, you know, by video link. And I guess for him, it's been a good thing, because you know, he's not very comfortable talking to a person face to face. So for him, I've had sort of 3 sessions chatting to him about everything from 5G technology to 1950s sci-fi movies, everything generally apart from mental health. But for him, it's allowed me to have that equitable platform that I get to know him, he gets to know a bit about me. And I guess from a youth work perspective as well, I think we can give a little bit more of ourselves than maybe some of the nurses and OTs do.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, because I find working with people on the wards, you know, I surprise them quite a lot, because they'll be like, oh, you know, I'm having a really hard time with this X, Y, or Z, and I'll be like, I can relate to that. I've had a similar experience, and I won't go in depth because obviously you have to draw a line somewhere, but I'll just say to them, you know, I've had something similar, or, you know, I'll let them know that I have been an inpatient before, and it is difficult and it is hard, and that really helps. Linking back to the first question, that really links back to, you know, building that rapport with them within that time constraint. And I you know, and I think a way to get around the online thing, maybe is to do it like this. We're recording this right now. Record it and keep it on file. Then, you know,
reflect.
Your base is covered. You can reflect. You can go back to it. You know, it might also be a useful tool for the young person. They can see how far they've come if they were interested in that. So,
that's a fantastic idea. And I mean, certainly, actually, I had colleagues of mine say to me, you know, when the debates were really raging about social media and how we should use it effectively within youth work, that actually it's more it's like a more transparent kind of thing, because all the messages are saved. So if you were on Facebook Messenger, you know, all those messages were there. If anyone needed to go back and have a look at anything, then they could, which was one of the arguments for it. I'm just going to read question number 3, because actually I think we're sort of talking about it now anyway.
yeah.
So it says there's lots of examples being shared on social media about creative and innovative ways that youth workers are doing youth work, such as online chat, such as Zoom meetings. Do you think these are effective approaches to youth work? So we are actually already here and kind of having this conversation.
Yeah.
Something I'll share just to maybe spark the conversation, because this guy's a teacher. So there's a really famous graduate of Derby University called Richard Gerver, and he was a head teacher, and he's now a consultant. He goes all around the world telling people, you know, about approaches to education. And I remember hearing him speak. He's a fantastic speaker, and one of the things that he said was, if you imagine young people today, like in their bedroom, for example, they might have the TV on, but they're like burning something that they downloaded off of the internet onto a CD, whilst WhatsApping their mate with a computer game on, where they're speaking to 5 different people who are all virtually playing that computer game at the same time, and sort of just describe this scenario of how amazing young people are, how adept they are with dealing with all this stuff. And then he was like, but in school, if you turn up with your mobile phone, you'll get detention. He was like, we have not moved as practitioners at the same speed that our young people have.
Yeah.
And so he used examples, they're school examples rather than youth work examples, but he was like, he let his children use their phones. So like he would send them out to the playground and say, take a picture of an insect or a piece of wildlife that you like and bring it back in, and they would use the rather than like fearing the technology.
Yeah. When I was in school, the phones were a no. It was a no. Detention after detention after detention. And like even now, like my nieces are going to school and they get told off for having their phones, and I'm like, but you're using iPads in class to teach, but you won't allow them to use their phone. I mean, I understand obviously you have to have some restriction because you don't want people just sitting there on social media, but on the flip side of that, some people concentrate better that way. I find if I'm distracted, I wouldn't say distracted, if I'm preoccupying myself with something else, I'm more likely to take in the information that's being given to me than if I was just sat there looking at it. So for example, at university, I have a habit of doodling. And I doodle all through class, and it looks like I am paying 0 attention. But you ask me a question and I can 100% recall back to you what's being said. And I find that a lot of young people work that way too. You know, rather than being sat there and just really like, okay, I have to have the clamps on my eyes and watch this. It's, okay, well, I'm doing this, but I'm also paying attention to this. And a lot of people work so much better that way, taking the information. And you find that if you allow people to express themselves and work in the way that they feel comfortable, then they're going to engage more, they're going to learn more, they're going to be able to recall more information that you've given them, they're going to take it in. So, you know, I think that online things and social media, they're great. I mean, obviously we have to be cautious of the ethical boundaries and our professional boundaries and what we're sharing and what they're sharing. You know, there's a lot of risk involved, but I think that the benefit could possibly outweigh that risk. I mean, we're too early in these stages to know yet because we're still in the midst of a pandemic. But I think that, you know, as we explore it more, you know, there could be a lot of benefit from it.
Absolutely, yeah. That's again, they're all really good points. And yeah, you know, something that's again that's maybe seen as being a negative has been appropriated and used for good. And again, this is the idea about working with someone's strength. If it's someone's strength to use an iPad or a phone to, you know, to work and develop in their learning, what's wrong with that? You know, technology is going to be part of our lives, you know, ongoing. And, you know, we're doing this on an iPad, you know.
I mean, I find with my learning, I use a laptop at university in class. A lot of people will take handwritten notes. I can't do that. I have to type them because I can't write fast enough because I'm dyslexic. And there might be quite a few young people in schools that have undiagnosed dyslexia, really struggling with that writing. But then if they have their iPad or laptop or whatever in front of them, or phone to use as a dictaphone to recall the information, you know, it can make things so much easier for that young person. And I think that it's only now really just being picked up on how like prevalent that is.
So we know, don't we, as youth workers, that people learn in different ways, people have preferences in how they like to engage, and I would like to think as youth workers we're always bearing that in mind, so we don't just have a default way that we communicate, but we think, how can I deliver this in lots of different ways so that everyone can find it accessible, and you can see that is getting out there into lots of other spaces. It's, you know, schools are adapting how they engage with kids, universities are adapting how they engage with their students, trying to take all of these things into consideration. And I know we can't credit all of that to youth work, but you do think, well, we've kind of been doing this for a while, guys, you know, like this is standard for us.
But I think everyone else needs to catch up as well.
I guess from the university experience, you know, the one thing that really is important, I think, especially in year one, is to be with other people, is to, you know, try to sort out who your friends are going to be, people who are going to be your allies, and like Max was saying earlier, dealing with people who might say something you might not like, and, you know, doing that in a constructive way. And it's part of that Tuckman thing, storming. And for me, year one at university was about storming, you know, and then forming, you know, the Tuckman group theory. And for me, you know, it's really important that you are with people. The virtual, you know, using Zoom and things like that, it's fine for now, but there is still something about that, you know, being with somebody, literally being with somebody, and maybe looking at the non-verbal communications, because people can say things but mean something else with their body language.
100%. I mean,
and I think we're missing.
Sorry, go on.
You are right. We are missing that. We actually don't know what's going on. We're only presented with something on a screen.
So our last question was about what does, you know, so actually what's your learning about working in a non-traditional youth work setting, and the current crisis, you know, that's going on, what does that mean for the future of youth work? So as we wrap up, as we come to a close, I suppose what would be really nice is to hear like a final reflection on, you know, so what have we talked about, and what does it mean for the future of youth work? So certainly for me, I think that what's come out of this is the diversity of our youth work sector, how youth workers come in all shapes and sizes, and that actually is a really good thing about youth work. And we don't have to agree with each other on opinions, on content, but what we do agree with each other is a passion for our methodology and our approach to working, and we learn how to have dialogue and then move forward together. I think for me that's been my kind of reflection on this. What about you guys?
Do you want to start next?
I was going to say, would you like to go first? I don't mind going first. Right, okay. Well, I think, there's so much. I think with the current crisis, I think a lot of youth work may move to online for the foreseeable future. We know that there's a challenge with keeping youth centres open. A lot are unsure if they're going to be able to reopen. I think, as you said previously, Mark, the online thing is great, but obviously the majority of a conversation is body language, and if you're not seeing that, you can't be entirely sure on, you know, what that person's trying to say to you. So I think that it's going to change the way we work massively. It already has, but I think it will continue to do that. And I think that we may have to look at a new set of boundaries, or evolving those boundaries to fit the way that we are working now. I mean,
that's huge, Max. You're talking about changing our youth work boundaries. So we'll hear from Mark, and then I might suggest that we have to come back and see you in a year and see, you know, have those boundaries changed? You know, we had that conversation a year ago. Mm-hmm. How does it look now? So that's my challenge to you, Max. We have to connect again in time. And Mark, what are your final reflections?
I mean, I guess for me, I've been, during lockdown, I've had this book that I got from the library in our trust, and if you can see it, and there's a phrase in it about secondary exclusion. So a lot of our young people are already excluded as it is. So the phrase of secondary exclusion occurs when services meant to support children are not in fact sufficiently alert to their needs, or when workers lack an appreciation of the specific social factors that affected their lives until now. And I think one of the challenges for us as youth workers working within, you know, primarily a medical model is to help to educate, you know, other practitioners about looking at the social factors. You know, the amount of young people now who are living in poverty, you know, people, you know, maybe using food banks and particular cultures of area, and where we can get a general idea of what someone's like. You know, the whole county line stuff at the moment. So there are a myriad of factors that can affect a young person's well-being, and we mustn't imagine that it's always a biological problem, because many of the issues that we deal with are actually social in nature, and that's why it's really important that as a youth and community practitioner, that you keep up with your reading, you look at the new theories that's coming around, and anything that comes out by the Children's Commissioner or by Joseph Rowntree or by any of these think tanks, you know, have a look at them. You'll always pick something up that you can use and run with. And this idea of constantly, you know, learning new things, integrate it into your practice, then people can't say anything then. But why have you done that? Well, it says here this, you know, always when you do something, always back it up with a theory or an idea. Then people cannot come back on you and say, oh, that's wrong. Well, actually, you know,
the magic of practice,
let's look at
isn't
this.
it? Theory and practice, putting it into place. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's
All
use it, you know, and look around your subject. Don't look directly at your subject. Look around. Psychology, sociology, you know, have a look around at what's going on, what the latest trends are. And, you know, I'm reading a publication here, Children's Mental Health Report from a United States website, which is really excellent. It's the Child Mind Institute. They did a lot of work on adverse childhood experiences, and they did a really good report last year on sort of social gaming and stuff, and the ideas of addictions and autism and gaming. But actually, they said that actually, you know, sometimes spent online is good for young people, and actually, they say in Australia and New Zealand, it's a primary way mental health services interact with the person. So yeah, I've got things to learn.
And then I've engaged with stuff that says, you know, our brains aren't actually wired to be able to deal with the amount of adrenaline and stimulus that we get by repeatedly engaging with social media throughout the day, and that actually it's detrimental to us. But this is what is fantastic about youth work, is that we can engage with the different perspectives, the different views, and we think about who are we working with, who is our young person, and what is the best for them. You know, like, we are the tool, aren't we? And we just try to be the best tool that we can to support young people. I know I'm obviously biased and think that youth work is fantastic, and I think it's important as well that we're not adversarial. You know, we're not out there to be adversarial with social workers, teachers, medical professionals. We're there to work alongside them and support us all to achieve our goals. I'm going to close it there just because we don't want to go on for too long. But thank you so much, guys, for your contributions. And I think that there's definitely scope for us to do more of this, and I'm really excited for our members and for youth workers to hear your voices, because I think they're really important to voices to be out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Brilliant.
Okay.